Hi, this is Steve Rose with Lawyer Lens. Welcome back for another episode. Thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to take this opportunity to discuss the what I call a so-called controversy with regard to the LIV Golf Tour and the PGA and how it really touches on some bigger issues with regard to the media world, contracts, investments, hypocrisy, and different interests out there that may not be framed publicly, but are the drivers of some of these stories. See, unfortunately, we're in a media world where we're not only influenced as to what we should think, but greater society is often influenced as to what to think about. All of a sudden, you'll have a week bringing up the flavor of the week story or the flavor of the month story, and everybody will be discussing this one topic that everybody all of a sudden cares vehemently about. And then the next month, something else will allegedly happen or something else will happen, and then all of a sudden that will be the story, and then the media will drive the narrative, and all of a sudden everybody's an expert on that topic, and everybody would have forgotten the topic that they talked about previously, and all of a sudden all that matters is this current topic. And we get lost in some of that sometimes. And with regard to the PGA, you've heard this story if you've been following it. If you're smart enough not to watch any of the news stations, then you're smarter than me, then you haven't heard much about any of this. But from CNN to MSNBC to Fox News to all of the network news channels, from David Muir on ABC to Lester Holt, so many of these shows have carried nationally at least one story about what's going on with the PGA Tour and LIV Golf. This has been expressed in newspapers across the country as well, from the Palm Beach Post to the Miami Herald to the New York Times. This is a pretty big story. You don't have to be an avid follower of golf to understand that golf, while not invented in the United States, has deep, long roots and history within the United States. 3 of 4 golf majors are played in the United States, and players from all over the world have joined the PGA Tour, which is the world-recognized standard of excellence, especially as they come to performance in major play. Nearly everyone has heard of the Masters and the famous green jacket. Tiger Woods winning all of those championships and coming back from all of this hiatus and injury and controversy to win the Masters. Very special and very ingrained. The PGA has always attracted the marquee players in golf, and that story has largely been unchanged for decades and generations. But now there is some serious competition, and the PGA, the heads of the PGA and the networks that carry them, they're a little nervous. You have this golf association. It's not really considered an association per se, but it is a company, a company called LIV Golf. Now, the CEO of LIV Golf is Greg Norman, whose name is popular amongst any golf fan, anybody who knows anything about the PGA history, a man who has won 20 events in the PGA, a world-class golfer, has had his share of meltdowns in majors, so there have been good and bad, but certainly an accomplished and major figure in the PGA and around golf for many years, has his own clothing line, a big name in golf and a big name in sports, and Greg Norman. Greg Norman's company is making some inroads. They're making some inroads because top golfers in the world, or at least golfers with big names who have been associated with the PGA, are starting to sign with the LIV Golf Tour. And this is despite the PGA saying if you sign with LIV Golf, you cannot participate in our regular events, which is a huge deal in golf because these golf players, they care a lot about legacy, and they care a lot about how they do in these events, even other than the majors. They want to participate in these events, and they can't by joining the LIV Tour. Why are these golf players, why would they ever join the LIV Tour? It's money. It's about the money. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with earning money if it is done honestly and within the rule of law. So why the controversy? Okay, they're joining the LIV Golf Tour. There's no big story if a sports figure seeks a more lucrative deal. But the so-called controversy has to do with the money that backs up the LIV Tour. So far you have the PGA, and now you have competition, the LIV Tour. Okay? Now, so-called controversy. Where's the LIV Tour getting all this money? And I say all this money, this is going to give you a perfect example of what's going on here, okay? Tiger Woods, the most famous golfer in the world today, and has participated in the PGA for so many years. His career his career PGA earnings are just over approximately $120 million. Now, this is this does not take in endorsements. Tiger Woods is probably a billionaire at this point, but he has earned from the tour itself $120 million over the lifetime of his career. Dustin Johnson, who's an accomplished golfer, has won tournaments, a big name in golf, but no one would argue his name is as big as Tiger Woods or some of the all-time greats in the game. You know how much LIV Tour just gave Dustin Johnson to join them and commit to them? $150 million. So the snap of the finger with one deal from golf itself, Dustin Johnson has out-earned Tiger Woods and everybody else in the history of the PGA Tour. They've attracted other names with money. Now, even the PGA president, Jim Rickerson, he was saying that we can't compete with the money. We are a not-for-profit. The PGA, by the way, is a not-for-profit organization that organizes these golf tournaments. We can't compete with the money that the LIV Tour is paying. Now, why do they have so much money to pay all these golfers? Why are they able to pay a Dustin Johnson $150 million, more than Tiger Woods has made in his entire career? Why have they been able to attract players like Phil Mickelson, players like Sergio Garcia, players like, just now it was announced, Brooks Koepka, and more every day you hear of another big golfer being poached, and it's for a significant sum of money. Because LIV is directly supported by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which is essentially 100% controlled by the Saudi prince, the Saudi government, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. So LIV is backed by the Saudis, ladies and gentlemen. MBS, prince. Now, there is controversy here. How can you go play for such an oppressive government? since this story came out, all you're hearing if you look at the articles that are discussing these stories, if you look at all these news stories, they are all using the same term that they're throwing out there. It's not a brand new term, but it's a term that's certainly being exercised a lot right now. It's called sports washing. Why would the Saudis want to be? Why would they allegedly want to get involved with golf? A lot of opinion makers out there are throwing around this term sports washing, meaning that you can have a government that's acting in an oppressive manner. They are alleged to have committed numerous atrocities, genocides, war crimes. But then that country will participate in sports. They'll invest a lot of money in sport. They will host major sporting events. They will have leagues that span across the world. And when those sports are pushed out, propaganda from those countries are pushed out. Advertising the country's flags, the country's leaders, they normalize the country through sports. People see that country on television. They see a raucous crowd rooting for a sports game. They see the country's involvement in sports that they love. It psychologically normalizes that country in the eyes of many, at least up into a certain point. That's what's referred to as sports washing. When China recently hosted the Olympics, many people threw out that term, although not nearly as much as they are now, and I'll get to China and all of that, and there are obvious reasons for that. But China was also alleged by some to sports wash. They have their own issues, and they are using all of these sports to show the world some normalized, so-called loving and competitive sports part of their country. So you have the Saudis backing this LIV tour, and you have a media campaign from YouTubers to David Muir on ABC to every sports cable news station. You have had negative stories about this. Well, how can these players sleep at night? Obviously, all these greedy players want is money. Money, 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 money. They don't care if they play with the most murderous people, the most murderous regimes. These players are playing for money. It obviously paints the players in a negative light. You have Saudi Arabia. We all are or at least mostly familiar with how they treat women over there. There are alleged atrocities committed in Yemen. Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist, goes into a Saudi consulate, and the Saudi prince, from what's reported, sends in a bunch of his operatives to kill and dismember this journalist. And we never see this journalist again. Numerous atrocities have been alleged to have been committed by the Saudi government, and they are an oppressive government. But at the same time, they're not the only oppressive government. And the PGA Tour, they are almost saying this out loud, but they're not. The PGA Tour president comes out and he says, if we're fighting with a sword, and the sword are dollar bills, we can't compete with a Saudi monarchy that can throw all of this money at players. So what are they doing? They're putting forth a campaign to slam the players, to slam the idea of playing for the Saudis, that this idea is completely wrong, it's unethical. How can you play for their government? They're being supported by media members who are tied in with the PGA. The PGA hosts golf, their golf events are on CBS, their golf events are on ABC, ESPN. There's a lot of money involved, and a lot of these big corporate media corporations, these big, huge conglomerate media corporations, they stand a lot to lose here if the PGA loses its viewership. And of course, losing top talent is a major threat. So while the PGA can't compete with dollars, they can certainly compete with a public campaign. They can make a player think twice before joining it because of reputational issues. It doesn't seem to be stopping players at this point. Like I said, you have several notable players who have already jumped ship from the PGA, and almost every day you hear of another major player going over to the LIV Tour. And the LIV Tour, by the way, it's not relevant for this video really, but it's a different format. It's 54 instead of 72 holes. There are different rules. It's not the same, but none of that is being brought up in any of these stories as to why they shouldn't join. It's all about you're joining Saudi Arabia, and it's not only the media companies, it's not only the PGA Tour company, but several of the PGA Tour players, the highest grossing players, have also been used and have come out to speak, used as a tool and coming out to speak against these players. You have notably Rory McIlroy, who came out and said, if you make a decision based on money, it's usually not going to end up well and good. And, with all due respect to Mr. McIlroy, if somebody else makes a decision based on money because they feel it's right for them, that's their business. And quite frankly, it's very easy for you to say and to make yourself look good to the media that's covering you because you're already loaded, you're filthy rich, so you might not care as much, and it's easy for you to say and to look like the hero, to look like the golf purist, so to speak. Quite frankly, I love Tiger Woods, but he did nearly the same thing, and he's talking about his love for the PGA and why he would never leave and everything like that. And that's all well and fine and good. But again, it's easy for him to say he has made an absolute fortune and continues to make an absolute fortune. And he is in no position to judge others based on their financial decisions. And there's a lot of hypocrisy going on over here because the LIV Tour, yes, they are financed by Saudi Arabia, okay? And given Saudi Arabia is an oppressive government and they have committed human atrocities throughout the years, fine, okay? The PGA, first of all, the PGA, it's really hypocritical because the PGA has done plenty of business with the Saudis in the past, but what's hilarious is the PGA Tour just in 2018 entered a 20-year contract with China. A 20-year contract. They entered a 20-year contract. Now, if you look at that contract, which I don't even know if it's publicly available, but I would imagine it wouldn't say the CCP on it as the other party other than the PGA, but it might as well say the CCP because they made their pact with a company called Shanghai. Now, Shanghai is a Beijing company which is funded largely by Yao Capital. The principal of Yao Capital is a very high up official in the Chinese Communist Party. And essentially all big business in Beijing has strong ties or is flat out run by the Communist Chinese Party. So yes, LIV, they're doing business with the Saudis. Saudis, their government is no good. PGA has entered a 20-year contract to do extensive business with the CCP. How can this PGA or any player of the PGA or any media outlet associated with the PGA put forth any negative stories with regard to LIV and its players doing business with the Saudis, when the PGA for the next 20 years is going to be doing business with the CCP? By the way, this isn't the first time they've done business with them, but this is just an example from 2018, a 20-year pact with the CCP, okay? The CCP has committed, inarguably, they've committed just as much, if not more, atrocities to their own people and around the world as with the Saudis, okay? You cannot make the argument that they haven't. First of all, besides North Korea being essentially a puppet, I mean, China, with a snap of their fingers, could make Kim Jong-il, they could essentially make him behave toward his people in any way that they want. It doesn't have to be so oppressive over there, but China controls that area, okay? China, the CCP has its thumb over their people. It's an extremely oppressive government. We don't have to go into the brutal history of the Communist Chinese Party. We can even go recently with regard to what's been going on in Hong Kong, the threat to Taiwan, the expansion into the South China Sea. But notably, although unfortunately not covered enough, in the northwestern part of China, you have an area called Xinjiang. That northwestern area has millions of Muslims living there. They are called the Uyghurs. I would highly recommend to watch the many documentaries available at the tip of your fingers via Google search or YouTube. Plenty of books out there in the public library about the Uyghurs and what they are being subject to today by the at the hands of the CCP. The CCP largely does not trust the Uyghur Muslims. They're seen as outsiders. They're seen as a threat. They are constantly having their oldest and most influential mosques shut down. They're constantly restricted as to how much they can practice their religion. They get regular visits to their own residences from CCP operatives to go interview them, look over their stuff, look over their apartment. All of their phones have to be fitted with certain spyware, so to speak, in order to monitor their every movement and communication. Their communications with the outside world are highly restricted. And today, reports vary, but it is estimated largely that there are at least 90 camps of concentration camps that are housing close to 1 million Uyghur Muslims. There have been stories of forced mass sterilizations These camps are carrying out re-education efforts, basically brainwashing Uyghurs in order to get rid of their beliefs and to fit more in with what the CCP views as an ideal society. There are mass murders, there are mass rapes, there is a systematic undoing and a systematic killing by the CCP of the Uyghur Muslims. And despite all of that, despite that being certainly known to these companies, whether you look at the PGA signing a 20-year pact, whether you look at the Olympics, whether you look at the NBA, the NBA, which does a ton of business with the ESPN, which does a lot of business with the PGA, the NBA owners have roughly 10 billion of their own dollars invested with the CCP. The NBA derives annually 9 figures from doing business with the CCP. When Daryl Morey, who at the time was a general manager with the Houston Rockets, all he did was tweet "Free Hong Kong." And the most notable present figure of the NBA, LeBron James, immediately shot back at him in public saying he needs to get educated and he needs to stop this, and basically shut Morey up. And Morey quickly retracted his statement and walked it back. The great Mark Cuban, you couldn't pay him enough to say a bad thing about China. All of these networks, CBS has a huge amount of money, billions of dollars invested in the internet and in the internet media with the CCP. NBC Sports, ESPN owns a minor stake in NBA China. ESPN does all kinds of business. ESPN is a subsidiary of Disney. So essentially, you have the PGA and basically every single TV station that it does business with, and every single TV station that's speaking against the players for joining LIV, they're all doing business with the CCP. But that seems to be okay. They can chase after the CCP and do what's lucrative for themselves. But when it comes to anything that threatens their interest, that threatens the PGA, that threatens essentially, if it threatens the PGA, it threatens the ratings on these channels. These players are no good because they are working for a company that is funded by an oppressive government. It's hypocrisy. You want to say that those players are wrong, then you have to say everybody who does any business with the CCP is wrong. And of course, you're not going to say that because we all essentially do business with China, whether we know it or not. We all own something that was made in China. We all buy. None of us go to a store and only buy American-made stuff. It's guaranteed we can go into anybody's house or apartment and find something made in China. And that's okay because we don't judge each other. It's essentially what we do in the world. There's nothing wrong with these TV stations. There's nothing wrong with the PGA doing business because it doesn't mean that they are supporting what they're doing. They're just doing business, and that's fine. But then don't bring out all of these hypocrisy and say, oh no, how could these players do this? They're working for MBS? The man slaughtered a journalist. The man oppresses women. And they oppress gays, and they do all of these horrible things, these terroristic efforts. What they did in Yemen. How can you support them? You are in no position to make that point. Subsequent to signing a 20-year pact with a company that's essentially funded in full by the CCP, and thus funded, thus controlled. So there is really no difference. The PGA and the LIV are cut from the same cloth. The PGA is threatened. The PGA has the interest of all of these big corporations, and thus you see all of these media smears and sports washing stories. Just to touch upon, speaking of LeBron James and the NBA. Like I said before, there's nothing wrong with doing business. If you're doing business to make money and you're making money honestly and it's out there, that's perfectly fine. But if you're going to do that, don't come out and make yourself out to be a social justice warrior, okay? Fighting for social justice is important, and there are a lot of injustices out there, unfortunately, okay? But it's very easy to fight for social justice when you don't risk anything and when it doesn't cost you anything, okay? Like I said, it would be perfectly okay for LeBron James to do all the business he wants in China. But then don't come out and pretend, though, that you're a social justice warrior, that you're fighting for minority rights. And because, on the one hand, you claim that and makes you look good in the United States, and I'm sure it helps your charitable funds, it helps you with your business associations, and it makes you look great on television, etc. But then, not only do you have nothing to say, you won't come out and say anything against the CCP, which helps bring in a lot of money for LeBron James, especially in his case. He just did a movie with Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers has huge investments with the CCP, okay? But LeBron James isn't only quiet on the CCP, but when Daryl Morey tweeted "Free Hong Kong," LeBron James has the nerve to come out and shoot him down publicly for him having the gall to speak out against China. You can't do that and then claim that you care about minorities. You can't speak out against somebody who speaks out against the CCP, who systematically murders and maims Muslims, a minority there, and then claim to care about minorities in general, claim to fight for social justice. Fighting for social justice and injustices in general is very important, and I commend you. But don't be a hypocrite, and don't just only do things for financial lucrative situations. You want to be a real hero, you want to fight the fight when there's something to lose, when there's a risk, when there's a sacrifice. If you know the history of Jim Crow and Martin Luther King, and even the pastor that directly preceded him, Vernon Johns, these people were social justice warriors. Vernon John, at great risk and really no reward in his tenure, and it really came about with Martin Luther King, who came after him, fought for social justice and put his neck out on the line, even though he had a relatively comfortable job. And we don't have to go into what the hero that Martin Luther King is and what he did to fight for social justice, and he stuck his neck out, and he ended up getting assassinated for it further on. And you have people who genuinely care and fight issues of the sort today, and they put their necks on the line, and they're not hypocrites. But there's a real problem out there with people who exploit minorities, who use what they are going through and their trials and tribulations for their own gain, and that's a big problem. It's an exploitive problem, and these media companies and the NFL, it's big business. Unfortunately, fighting social justice has become big business for them, and it's evident that they don't care, because if they cared, they would speak against parties to the detriment of their own wallets, but they never do. They never take risks. They do what's financially most advantageous. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't claim that you have some high moral ground. You can't claim that you're fighting for the rights of minorities. You can't claim that somehow certain players are morally inferior because they're taking a lot more money to play elsewhere, when you're doing the exact thing that you're accusing the other players of. If you're a player in the PGA, you're playing for a company that does business with the CCP. If you're a TV channel, you are doing business with the CCP. You are hosting the PGA on your channel. You're doing the same thing that you accuse LIV and its players of doing, and it's wrong. The players who have joined LIV, they've done absolutely nothing wrong. Their reasons, it's their business. They shouldn't have to stand there and answer stupid questions from media like, well, if Putin started a tournament tomorrow, would you join it? How about it's none of your business what I would do? How about go talk to your boss about how much his company is doing business with the CCP, who is systematically exterminating Uyghurs as we speak? It's just good to call out hypocrisy. It's good to fully understand a 360 degree view of everything. It's good to see things from different sides. And it's good to question the media as much as you can because they have their own interests. I especially question them when everyone seems to be putting forth the same message and even in some cases the same wording. If every single channel is talking about sports washing, then that raises alarm bells. And I just wanted to bring this up because a lot of people are slamming these players publicly. And this is despite the little known fact that the PGA has a 20-year contract beginning in 2018 with a company that is under the thumb of the CCP. Oh, and by the way, a little known fact, you can find this in the Boston Herald amongst other papers if you dig, but at the time of the signing of that contract, there were people who wanted to see the details of that contract between the PGA and the Chinese company. And although the PGA is a not-for-profit, they refused to put forth any of these records on their taxes. Their lawyers claim that the PGA made this investment into its own separate entity so that while they control it, all they have to do is declare on their taxes that they are doing business outside of the United States, but those records don't have to be shown. Now, why would they want to keep this a secret? Why wouldn't they have wanted to just release the records? What would they have to hide here? Why not announce, yeah, we've signed a $500 million deal to do X, Y, and Z in China. It's exciting. We're trying to grow the sport. Because they know how this would make them look. And especially now with the stories going, they would look like the hypocrites that they are. I'm always skeptical when people are being slammed universally, and in looking into it further, I just wanted to bring this to your attention. And of course, I welcome comments. I welcome disagreement. If I'm wrong about anything, I'm certainly willing to learn, and please in the comments let me know if I've missed anything. If you agree, why do you agree? Or any thoughts on this video, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to be bringing a lot more content your way. And I thank you for your time, and I hope that you can get something out of this, and I hope that I can learn something from you as well. This is Steve Rose from Lawyer Lens. Take care and have a good night.